it's all the same really at Chelsea, covering Chelsea Football Club. And yeah, they're quite active in the market. I think this week has been the week that they've got going a little bit. They've made offers for Raphinha. They've actually made an offer there. Leeds are happy with it, willing to accept it.
There's no way back, I presume, for Lukaku.
There's no way back, in my opinion, as long as Thomas Tuchel is the manager. This was a big change, by the way, because they had Koundé all wrapped up in terms of wages and salary anyway, but they switched attention to Matthijs de Ligt from Juventus. He seems to be the number one target that they're going for. They might even have to move away from signing superstars. I know that Romelu Lukaku is probably the biggest superstar in the squad last season. It was the biggest disaster. So maybe it's a case of going back to the values that won them the Champions League. I mean, we're going to be busy. Chelsea reporters are going to be busy until the end of the transfer window, deadline day. And that's just the way Chelsea like it.
Welcome to the latest Hayters Podcast. I'm delighted to welcome our latest guest, Nizaar Kinsella. For 6 years or more, Nizaar has been the Chelsea correspondent for Goal.com, but he's about to move to the Evening Standard. Really exciting move. Great news for us, great news for the Standard, and great news for Chelsea fans, keeping you all up to date with the news. We're just coming to the end of June. The transfer window's been operational for a few weeks now. And Nizaar, what's the latest?
Yeah. Thanks for introducing me there and explaining my job change. It's going to be exciting. But yeah, it's all the same really at Chelsea, covering Chelsea Football Club. And yeah, they're quite active in the market. I think this week has been the week that they've got going a little bit. Todd Bowley's doing the work himself, and they've made offers for Raphinha. They've actually made an offer there. Leeds are happy with it, willing to accept it. Unless somebody comes and pays more than Chelsea. So Chelsea have the biggest offer in. It's roughly about £55 million plus add-ons. And they've offered about $6 million in wages to the player, which probably works out 120 grand a week. It's firm, concrete offer there. It's a player that Arsenal were interested in, and Tottenham also were interested a little while ago before switching their attentions to Richarlison. So Chelsea would be beating the other London clubs to sign him. The only problem is that Barcelona are still in the mix, and Raphinha is waiting to see if Barcelona can match Chelsea's offer. It might be that he'll favour a move to Spain over, staying in the English Premier League, next season. So, that's the only concern there, is if Barcelona come, who don't have a lot of money, by the way, so they might not make an offer. But if they do, then Raphinha might have his head turned. So that situation there. There's other players that Chelsea are in contact with. They're in contact with Raheem Sterling. They're considering making an official bid for him. It's unclear whether Man City will step aside, but it seems the only way that Man City can get money out of this situation is to sell him this summer, because Raheem Sterling's contract's up next year. So it's either sell him or lose him for free. But you have to sell him to a rival. So very interesting situation there with the England man. Nathan Ake, they want to fix the attack, and they're doing that. But at the same time, they're looking at defenders. So they've lost to Antonio Rudiger and Andreas Christensen, and the defenders they're trying to sign at the moment. This was a big change, by the way, because they had Koundé all wrapped up in terms of wages and salary anyway. But they switched attention to Matthijs de Ligt from Juventus. He seems to be the number one target that they're going for. Price is a concern there. De Ligt's contract also expires at the end of next season. So Juventus either have to cash in or lose him for free potentially this summer. There's a lot of negotiations going there. Juve would like to keep him and offer him a new deal as well. So it's a pretty tense situation there around the negotiations, around Chelsea trying to get him out, around wages and things like that. So that's a big thing going on. And then Nathan Ake as well is another centre-back they're looking at, Chelsea, with Jules Koundé as well, which is something they haven't ruled out doing. Sevilla actually contacted Chelsea to try and revive the deal because they expected to sell Koundé and they were ready to sell him. And Chelsea seem to have switched their attention to these other two. Centre-backs are massively on the agenda as well as attackers here. So, it's a big sort of summer I'm expecting. We had a lot of indication that Chelsea were going to spend big, and finally this week we've had some evidence that they will.
So that's you're talking about the players coming in, possibly. Players already gone. You mentioned the two defenders, but obviously the biggest news perhaps is Romelu Lukaku going back on loan to Inter. It just didn't work out, did it? And I know you've reported a number of the factors that came into play. One of your tweets, one of your stories on a podcast actually sort of went viral. Just tell us what do you think really went on there?
Yeah, I think that there was, it went badly. Simply put, Chelsea signed him, club record signing. Let's remember, £100 million last summer. He's been there for less than a year, and now he's an Inter player. The Inter loan deal sees them paying Chelsea a loan fee of €8 million plus €2 million in add-ons if they win the league. So it's a pittance really compared to what Chelsea paid. It's less money than Chelsea paying in transfer installments. So Chelsea actually losing money by sending him out on loan. And also, the Lukaku took a wage cut, about a 35% wage cut to go to Inter, his former club. So yeah, it's been, it's been a disaster really, hasn't it? As a transfer goes, club record signing, leaves in less than a year. But where did it go wrong? I mean, initially it started well, he's scoring goals. And then after that, he stopped scoring goals. But the reasons were, even when he was scoring goals, he was outperforming his expected goals. So the style of play wasn't suiting him that Chelsea played. Now, people should have noticed this really before making such a big offer. But Chelsea won the Champions League the year before, playing a high-intensity, high-pressing style of football, very fluid movements and things like that. There wasn't really a single individual they built their play around. Now, Lukaku needs the play to be built around him. He needs space to run into. He prefers to play on the break. He likes to run into space. And Chelsea plays possession game with pressing. So it's a completely different style. And it really didn't suit him. And he couldn't adapt. And Chelsea tried to adapt to him a little bit, but didn't really go the whole hog to properly adapt to his style of play, what he wants. And it was something that probably always going to fail, with all those factors in play. Then, to make matters worse, he gets injured and gets COVID as well. And that recovery from injury and COVID, he felt that he was fine. He felt he was ready to play, but Thomas Tuchel kept holding him back. And in that time, when he's being held back, he gave an interview to Sky Italia, unsanctioned by the club, unsanctioned by his agents. Nobody really knew that he did it. He arranged an interview directly with a journalist. And, in that interview, he criticised Thomas Tuchel for his handling of his injury. The timing of the interview was really bad as well. Chelsea were in poor form and things like that. To criticise Tuchel at that time in that way, it really, it was a really big scandal at the time. You've got to remember that Marina Granovskaya, the former director, and also Petr Cech were involved as mediators to try and relax the situation, to try and rescue it between coach and player. And they did. They successfully sort of did that. They were able to continue. But, from that point on, Lukaku had a fractured relationship with the fan base as well. And from talking to people around Lukaku over the years, not just last year, but, through his national team, through his former clubs, this is a player who needs to be loved and needs to feel important. And then after that interview, he felt like, he wasn't popular with the fans. He wasn't maybe the most popular with the coaching staff. And those relationships are broken. And that sort of also affects his performance. So, yeah, he barely scored a goal in 2022. And, at the end of it, it was thought that, for the new owner to back Thomas Tuchel, the new owner was happy to lose loads of money and let a player go. So that was kind of the decision. It's almost like, it's a bit of an embarrassment to let a player go like that, but it's also exactly what the coach needed to move on, to progress the team. And it took Chelsea maybe eating a bit of humble pie. I don't think this move would happen if Marina Granovskaya, Roman Abramovich and Petr Cech were still at the club. We had Petr Cech even saying that he didn't want to sell Lukaku this summer. He wanted him to stay and fight for his place. And he can still make a success of his time at Chelsea. But between Thomas Tuchel and Todd Bowley, who are running the transfers now, they decided differently. And these other people have been forced out. Abramovich sold the club and the others have been put in either interim roles or left. Petr Cech's left, and Marina Granovskaya is in an interim role without a lot of power. So it's quite a big thing to sum up, really, and it almost summarises how Chelsea are approaching this transfer window as a whole as well.
I mean, there's no way back, I presume, for Lukaku.
There's no way back, in my opinion, as long as Thomas Tuchel is the manager, and he should survive because he's a great manager and he's being backed. So at the moment, things can change in football, but right now it's not looking good.
And of course, that structural change, as you say, that they are looking for a director of football, or there's talk of a new director of football. But it obviously gives much more control to Thomas Tuchel in the transfer market, given Todd Boehly's relative inexperience in terms of football, for sure. And it's almost like a return to the old school of management, isn't it? Where someone like Alex Ferguson or Arsene Wenger would dictate which players came in or left. Not so much the more modern model of the sort of sporting director or the director of football, like Paratici at Tottenham, or that sort of situation that you see at so many clubs now. It's almost a return to the past, isn't it?
Yeah, it is, I guess. It simplifies the structure at the moment. The changes in the boardroom and in the football operation as well. Thomas Tuchel is probably the most powerful Chelsea manager since Jose Mourinho in his first spell, where he was really involved in a lot of stuff that was going on. There is sort of a sporting director at Chelsea. That's the owner. Todd Boehly is appointed himself the interim sporting director. He's also the chairman, and he's also the owner of the football club. So he's doing a huge breadth of activity, and it remains to be seen how well he can do all those things, having never experienced, running a football club before. But he's an intelligent man. He's very savvy. He knows what he wants. So maybe it'll work out well with the advice of Thomas Tuchel. He's really powerful in this situation. He's advising. He's sorting things out. He's getting deals done that maybe wouldn't have happened before, like the Lukaku one out. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. It's completely new ground for Chelsea. We don't have anything to compare this to, but eventually, like you said, there's going to be a sporting director put in place, and maybe a more concrete, stable structure, a more conventional structure will be put in place. After this summer is over and done with.
I mean, it's fairly sort of taken for granted, perhaps, that the whole sanctions against Abramovich and the upheaval pretty much ended Chelsea's chances of challenging for the Premier League, and it was soon after that the Champions League was over. But let's not forget they got to two finals and didn't lose them in 120 minutes of each. They lost on penalties. So Chelsea are a side that can challenge. But Petr Cech made the point when I spoke to him not long ago, actually, just before he left. That they it was more to do with the disruption with COVID and that period of injuries and illness around Christmas that probably derailed their season more than anything. So is there a suggestion that maybe if the injuries, the illness and everything else is gone away, the distractions have gone away, obviously the sanctions and the uncertainty, Tuchel's established himself as you say, the most powerful most powerful manager since Jose Mourinho. Do you think he's got a real tilt at challenging City and Liverpool for the Premier League this year?
Yeah, I don't think. I think Chelsea see it as a rebuilding season, actually, after losing the two defenders and having to assimilate new defenders into the system. That's certainly the words that have been used since that point. They felt that last season, actually, Petr Cech, when you spoke to him and some people behind the scenes, if you catch them in an unguarded moment, they felt that if Reece James and Ben Chilwell hadn't got big injuries, that they could have really pushed for the Premier League, title. There's also, a lot of cup competitions to be involved in. Chelsea played the joint most games of any club last year in European football alongside Liverpool. And at times they looked like they could threaten to really compete at the top. But I think that, in reality for me, I don't completely subscribe to that view. I think to say that if everything goes your way that you can compete for a title, I don't think that that's realistic in football. You're always going to get something that derails you a little bit. Man City sometimes handle really big injuries very well. We've seen De Bruyne out for many months and they're still going to win titles. So I don't think Chelsea are at that level yet. They're at the level where they can compete, but they're not number one contenders. They're not the top club in English football where they want to be. They're close, and I think they have the right manager to do it as well. But now I think it's also about putting in the right structure behind him and bringing all that together. They have a young squad which works in their favour, so it's just about plugging a few gaps here and there. But they really need to plug those gaps very well. They need to find goals, and they need to find a system and be humble in a way of working. They might even have to move away from signing superstars. I know that, Romelu Lukaku is probably the biggest superstar in the squad last season. It was the biggest disaster. So maybe it's a case of going back to the values that won them the Champions League, that sort of dogged, hard to beat mentality, not being ashamed that that's their style of football. Man City might win 6-7-0 every now and again. Chelsea might not do that, but if you can't score past Chelsea, then that's a great starting point, isn't it, to win titles? So I think that might be the way that we see Chelsea move back to that old way when they won the Champions League. And I think that there's a real belief in the squad, in Thomas Tuchel, that he's the man. There's a belief in the owner, in the manager as well. But I think it might take time with all these new players. A lot of them are going to arrive late, maybe in pre-season and things like that. I think that this season might be a year too soon for winning the Premier League. But I think, within the season after, I think that Chelsea really need to be pushing for that Premier League title. It's been long enough. They've not won it since Antonio Conte won it in 2017. So I think that the appetite really is that's the one to win now. And I think that maybe it'll take a bit longer, but who knows? If this transfer window goes unbelievably well, then maybe Chelsea will be ready to win the league sooner than many would anticipate.
And of course, as well as new signings, there should be some players coming back from loan or available to come back from loan. And I'm guessing Tuchel will make a decision in pre-season about what he sees next year for Conor Gallagher, Gilbert, those sort of players, whether he thinks they could do with another year away or they could come straight back into the squad and be contending for a place.
Yeah, that's true. That's the way he's looking at it. Chelsea every summer have this influx again of their young, exciting loanees. There's a chance for these guys to break through. But, Conor Gallagher's clearly the front runner to come back. He was an exceptional player of the season at Crystal Palace. And Thomas Tuchel, I know for a fact, he absolutely adores him. He's met him I think he met him in a supermarket in Cobham, just bumped into him and they had like a little chat about what next season might hold. There's those kind of stories. So, but at the same time, we always look towards these kind of guys who maybe have broken into the England team. But Trevor Chalobah did it last summer, and he came from nowhere. No one was talking him up. He was playing in France. He probably didn't have the same eyeballs on him. And there's a lot of other loanees. You mentioned Gilmore. There's Dujon Sterling, who's at Blackpool. There's Levi Colwill, who's at Huddersfield. Ethan Ampadu, who's at Venezia in Serie A. There's probably loads I'm missing out as well. So anyone who's playing at Championship or top flight level, I'd suggest has a reasonable chance of impressing Thomas Tuchel to be in the squad. But the ambition in the transfer market also limits those spots as well. So, it's difficult. There's Armando Broja's got an offer from West Ham, or he's got a lot of strong interest from West Ham, I should say. You could see some of these guys being sold to fund other transfer business as well. So, Chelsea have to be a bit cute, sell the right ones at the right price, and keep the others. They funded that Lukaku signing last summer by selling £90 million worth of academy players. They'll probably do the same again this summer, but they need to be smart and not make decisions that they might regret at the same time.
Yeah, I mean, one of those was Tammy Abraham, and there's plenty of Chelsea fans who'd love to have seen him stay, given that they were struggling for an old-fashioned centre forward who could score goals.
Yeah, and Mark Gurhey as well at Crystal Palace, and Tino Livramento. Of course, he's injured right now, but looks an absolute brilliant player. And these guys look like the future of English football. Never mind their club sides.
And obviously, to raise money, it could be other big names going out. I mean, Timo Werner has been mentioned as a make weight, isn't he, in the De Ligt deal? Do you think he's got a future at Chelsea?
Yeah, well, I think, Chelsea trying to sign 2 attackers. They already struggled for minutes with their attackers last summer. So if you're saying Raphinha is an indirect replacement for Lukaku, and they might sign, or probably have a decent chance of signing Raheem Sterling, then something's got to give. Somebody else has to leave. Timo Werner has been used in talks for Matthijs de Ligt in sort of a swap deal arrangement. And I think Chelsea are quite interested in doing swap deals. It's quite common in US sports. But it's uncommon in English football or European football. But they've got all this talent. We mentioned all the talent, when we're talking about the loanees, but Chelsea had a huge squad last season, even outside of the loanees. So, yeah, Timo Werner could leave, discussed in a swap with Juventus. Dortmund have previously shown an interest in him. Christian Pulisic, maybe even. I don't think he'd be the first one they choose to let go, but if they can't get rid of others, maybe it'll be him. And then Hakim Ziyech as well. I think he's one who's, AC Milan have shown an interest in, and he could leave this summer as well. So, that's just attack. You've got N'Golo Kante and Jorginho with only 1 year left on their contracts as well. What's going to happen there? That's still a big, big question for me. And that might even, if you sell both of them or one of them, might free up a midfield signing, and we know Chelsea are interested in West Ham's Declan Rice. So, this is a long transfer window, and a lot is going on. There's Kepa could leave as well, and they might sign a new number 2 goalkeeper. Kepa is somebody who's maybe a bit frustrated with his situation right now. Marcos Alonso and Azpilicueta, they're pushing for exits to Barcelona. Barcelona have been very strong on trying to convince Chelsea to sell both players for a very low fees. Now, will Chelsea deal with them? Let's see. There's tons and tons going on in terms of exits. And we're going to be busy. Chelsea reporters are going to be busy until the end of the transfer window, deadline day. And that's just the way Chelsea like it.
Fantastic. Nizaar, it's been a pleasure speaking to you. We'll look with interest and see what happens over the coming weeks. And for sure, as all our viewers on Hayters TV, follow Nizaar. He's always on the money. Follow him on social media, and then you'll soon be able to start reading him in the London Evening Standard as well. Thanks for your time, Nizaar, and good luck.
Cheers. Thanks for having me on again.
Cheers.